Hey guys, how's it going? All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Perception Neuron version 1 and 2.0, the similarities, the differences. We're going to talk about how you can upgrade your 1.0 kit to the 2.0 strap system. I've got a accoutrement of toys for this. If you are aware, or if you're familiar with our product, the Perception Neuron V1 and V2 fit inside these little handy-dandy carrying cases. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get this party started. Cool. Can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So Rock did a great job introducing the team. You'll see James and I here in Los Angeles. Daniel and Alex are in Miami. A couple of our partners that Rock was talking about that he had mentioned.
Yeah. Ari, could you just go back for a second? I just want to make a note that our information is there, our emails. So in case you guys do have any questions, you want to reach out to us afterwards, feel free to do so. Our main channel of communication is contact@neuronmocap.com. That funnels in. Daniel, Ari, and all of us have access to that email, but those are our personal work emails here. So in case you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And then perfect timing. Now Ari can switch to the other slide for us.
All right.
So yeah, some of our other partners, if you're curious of where you could find Perception Neuron, we're obviously in Miami. We have the LA office, but I know we have Target 3D. We have some folks from Target 3D joining us in the chat today. They're based in London. You could email them for any questions you guys have. They have a studio. We also have partners in France. Our friends down in Cinetica, studios in Mexico. We have partners in Tokyo and South Korea. So, we have a global network of partners and distributors that are able to support you for anything that you need.
I pushed too hard on my French press and just spewed coffee all over my kitchen counter.
Oh, no. So perfect. You can go ahead and head over to the
introduction.
Yes, I think we did that.
I think we've covered that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, did we talk about pricing yet?
Yes. So again, just a reminder, $14.99. It was announced on Tuesday. That is permanent pricing, effective immediately from Tuesday. And you'll see that reflected on our bundles for iClone, as well as the face rig plugin bundles. Those are fully available for anyone that wants to make a purchase. Yes. And then the upgrade kit. Yes. So the upgrade kit, there's a lot of users that are still from our original batch from the Kickstarter, or even from the early onset when we were still doing the V1. For those of you that are using that system, you can upgrade to 2.0, which is primarily what we're going to be covering. That new system integrates within the whole ecosystem of what we have with the Snap and Lock base system. So from the full body suit to any different modular components that we have, the 2.0 will make life easier for everyone.
So if you guys are able to see my webcam right now, this is an example of the version 1.0 main body harness. So you'll see the upper back is made out of a really hard plastic that's sewn into some nice leather that goes into the upper body straps. And then the lower body harness is the same. It's a nice solid piece of plastic that goes into the leather harness. These are great harnesses, but when it comes to cleaning them, it can be a bit challenging.
Hey, Ari, sorry to cut you off, but when you're using your video, just go ahead. There's a little button that says highlight my video, and that way they can see that as the main video. Can you give him access, Quadra?
He have co-host access.
Okay, he should be able to, and that will switch between your share screen. You have to stop share screen before you do that. That way they can see. That way they can see full screen your video.
Okay, hang on.
Oh yes, perfect. So now you can bring that up. Yes.
Yeah. Now you can see it.
Okay, so what I was saying is this is the 1.0 suit that has the hard upper body shell that goes into the leather. So with the older strap system, It was good. It was very solid and kept the neurons exactly where you wanted them. But when it comes to cleaning these, you have to be very delicate and hand wash them because the electronics are all sewn into the strap system. Whereas with our upgrade kit, not only does all of the straps have rubber inside that helps hold it in place, but it's also all plastic and socket system. So you can disconnect all of the electronics and then just wash the straps separately in a bucket of warm water without needing to worry about damaging any of the electrical equipment. So that's the benefit if you've got a V1 suit of updating to the newer strap system, is that care and maintenance, cleaning, hygiene is much, much easier. Kind of important nowadays. So let's continue.
Yes.
Okay.
So the webinar rules and usage, we covered these last time. Again, there's a chat down in the bottom that you guys could write to us, live. We'll be seeing what's happening, as well as any Q&As that you guys have. Post your questions. I know we already have some on there that we'll be answering throughout. Some may be live, through our voices. Some will be in the chat. So as those come in, just continue to send us questions and talk to us in the chat, and we'll be able to answer you guys.
Okay, a couple of things that we're going to cover today. This is sort of just the broad overview. I'm going to go over some terminology that deals with the Perception Neuron version 1 and 2, how to prepare your capture environment, prepping the suit, suiting up your talent, doing a proper posture calibration. And that was covered a little bit in our first webinar, but we're going to go over it specifically with the newer suit, with the version 2 suit to discuss some of the slight differences. And then connecting the suit into our software, which is Axis Neuron, and then going over a little bit of the basics on Axis. We're not going to cover too much because we're going to do a whole nother webinar that's specifically about the features of Axis. It's going to break down all of the different sliders and bars and checkboxes. And we'll do a deeper dive into that on another webinar. So continuing on, just so that people know what we're talking about when we're saying it. So when we refer to a neuron, we're actually talking about the little neuron sensor, which you can see here is on the right-hand side, the upper right. So that's the small IMU chip that's placed into each one of the sockets. So are you guys able to see Daniel's video?
Yes.
Cool.
If you want to highlight him. Yes.
Well, can the audience see?
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay. So the sockets are, you can see right in the middle, that is what the neuron goes into. So there's 32 of those if you're doing full finger capture. 17 if you're just doing body with paddle hands. Daisy chaining. So the big difference between the version 1 and 2 and our Pro and Studio kit is that all of the sensors are daisy chained together. That means the cables connect to one another. So there's wires running along the entirety of your limbs that all connect to your central transmission hub. And pogo pins. The pogo pins on the cables that are daisy chained together, those are the little pins that transmit all the data. So all of those cables go down to your transmission hub, which is seated to the left hip on the harness. And when the suit is USB tethered, that means that the suit is physically connected to the hub is connected to the computer via a USB cable. And that's when it's plugged into the data port on the hub. There's 2 USB connections on the hub. There's the data port, which is what you use when you connect to the USB of a computer. And then there's a 5-volt power port, and that's used when you're connecting an external battery to power the hub for wireless use. And when you go wireless, you set up the hub to connect to a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi router. We've had a couple of troubleshooting tickets where somebody has both power and data connected to their hub, and the suit doesn't show up in Axis. So just to be clear, you only use one or the other port on the hub at a time. Either you're going to be USB tethered, or you're going to put in a power pack and be wireless. A couple of accessories that are very, very handy. First, if you want to go wireless, you need a USB power pack. So the best size for power that I've found is here on the left. There's the Anker. It's called an Astro A1 candy bar. You can find them on Amazon for less than $30. And with one of these guys at a full charge, you can do a full day of motion capture without needing to recharge that battery. It's fantastic. And it's also small enough, the footprint is tiny enough to actually fit inside a holster. So you can get either I found that holsters for mace or 9mm clips, that candy bar battery fits perfectly inside. And then instead of needing to worry about your talent having pockets, or because a lot of times people wear sports pants, yoga pants, and they either may not have a pocket or it's uncomfortable to be wearing it while capture. So you can take the battery, put it in a hip holster, and then put that on the right hip, and then just connect the USB power connection over to it. Also, if you're looking for portability, if you do off-site shoots, if you go to studios, you'll want to have a portable Wi-Fi router. There's several out there that are very small. So you don't need anything extravagant for our suits. You can do any 2.4 gigahertz portable router. This one, I think, is around $60, $70. Can be found on Amazon. We'll put links in the chat for some of these.
Yes, they're going on. Ari, could you go over why it's important to use a dedicated router as opposed to using an open network?
Yeah. So a lot of people at schools, they want to connect to their school network, or at home, you want to, hop on your own home Wi-Fi router. And the problem is that when you're on a router that's connected to the internet, there's a lot of traffic that goes across that. And so you can get packet delays, you can get noise from other Wi-Fi channels or other devices that are trying to connect to your router. Schools, public hotspots, those are all very, very sort of toxic Wi-Fi environments because there's so many devices trying to hit the channels that the reliability of your capture data and the reliability of your suit's connection to your router is much, much stronger when you have a dedicated Wi-Fi router that's not connected to the internet.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about the 3 essential keys to better mocap. And they are your environment, sensor placement, and proper posture calibration. So one of the things that our V1 and V2 suits are a little bit more susceptible to is magnetic interference because the sensors are much smaller and they are unshielded. When did the V2s and the V1s come out? What was their release date?
That was a flash. The V1s originally, when we did the first Kickstarter, was September 2014, and then we ended up coming out with those. I believe it was June 2014. It was probably about 6 months after the Kickstarter, and then probably about a year and a half later, we ended up coming out with the V2s. So Perception Neuron 32 is definitely, even 1 and 2 is our oldest product line. It's still very reliable. That's why it's still available. It ends up being the most affordable motion capture system out on the market. But it's an older technology, right, from a few years back.
It's the older system that's the entry level system, but over time, over the past couple of years, we've included firmware updates and software updates. Every time there's been a new version of Axis Neuron for these suits, we've been pushing firmware updates, which gives you better sensor quality and better data quality.
Yeah, and we're still working on that. Yeah.
And if you have one of these suits and you haven't recently checked to see if there's a firmware update, we'll go ahead and take you through that process once we get to the software side of things. So, but going back to environment. Environment is very, very important with these suits because if you are capturing near a magnetic field, okay, which could be pipes under the ground, electrical in the wall, parts of your desk could be magnetized, and the sensors are made of an IMU, which is an inertial motion unit. So they have accelerometers, they have gyroscopes for rotation, and then they have a magnetometer, which tells them where Earth's magnetic north is. So if you expose them to a speaker, a cell phone, a laptop keyboard, the magnetic field generated by those items causes the sensor to no longer know where magnetic north is. And so you'll start to get some spinning or some helicoptering, and that's not what you want when you're trying to get accurate skeletal data. So when it comes to your environment, first, perform a visual survey. Try to make your capture area as clean and clear as possible. Example, if you look at Daniel's studio environment, it's very nice and clean. If you look at my living room, not so much. There's a lot of clutter because I turned it into my cat's parkour gym. But so first of all, just visually make sure you've got a nice open space. But again, the challenge with magnetic fields is that you can't know what you can't see. So you can actually use your smartphone to download a magnetometer app, and it will be able to tell you if it senses magnetic fields. But you need to get your phone close to the various items. So what I like to do, if I go to a new location, and let's say a studio has an empty office room, and they say, okay, we want to just film here. I'll take a couple of sheets of paper, I'll turn on the magnetometer app on my phone, and I'll put my phone on the paper, and then drag that paper in sort of an S pattern around the floor to see if there are any pipes, electrical conduits, metal I-beams, anything that would interfere with the foot capture of a session. And we see James here has a magnetometer app up there. What version is that? Oh, yeah, okay. So if there are hot spots on the ground where people shouldn't step, if you find strong magnetic fields on the floor, take some tape, mark it down, sort of, you can put down, painter's tape or marking tape, just whatever it is so the actors know that they can avoid those areas. Oh, I jumped a slide, sorry. So, some tips are maintain clean working space, have enough walking area, have enough arm span so that you can do all of the calibration poses and also any of the performances, any of the movements within your performance, and avoid working near devices that cause magnetic interference. Here we go. The preferred app that I like is called the Physics Toolbox, and I've got links for it down below. And with these, here, let me go ahead and give you an example of.
We're going to attach this on the YouTube link as well, so make sure you guys follow this video on our YouTube channel. We'll put the links there for everyone.
Yeah, they're going.
So we're going to stop sharing for a second. So right here, this is a magnetometer app. This is the Physics Toolbox. And some of the challenges that you have, let me see, what do I have nearby? I have a speaker. Okay. So if I take a speaker and I start to put the app close to it, let's see if this actually, all right. When the sensor is near the speaker, you see how it's jumping up to over 100? You want to try and keep this number below 70. So as you're checking to see if your environment is going to be toxic for motion capture, not only can you use this to see where the hotspots are, but also how far away from that object you should keep the sensors. So You can measure the distance and say, okay, my actors need to stay 6 inches away from this area. Or if there's a hot spot on the floor, they need to stay 2 feet away from it. It all depends on what's around you. I hope that... We have any questions as far as that goes? Because once you've ensured that your environment is good for capture, you're ready to start building your suit. One tech support question that we had quite a while ago is a brand new studio. They had a couple of our suits, and every time that they would calibrate the sensors and then go to use them, the sensors would drift. So I asked them to send me a physical video of them using the magnetometer app at different parts of their studio. The floor checked out fine, the open air was fine, but when he went over to the table where the laptop was sitting and where all the sensors and the suits were being built on, it was a giant metal table. So when he put his phone in the magnetometer app on that table, it spiked to over 600. Which meant that the table he was working on was actively interfering with the performance of the sensors. It's always best to use either a wooden or a plastic table, or a lot of IKEA furniture is made of that thick, I think it's called balsa wood. And that stuff is great to work on, except in the corners where the legs screw on. The screws that are used to put together IKEA furniture generate a pretty interesting magnetic field. So, that being said, I have an IKEA table that I usually build suits on. So I'm going to go ahead and let's go back to, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second. Oh, wait. I have stopped screen sharing. Aha. So when I get ready for a shoot, what I'll do, I'll usually arrive a half hour to an hour early and start setting everything up. So when I build the suits, I build them first on a table. So you basically connect everything together, lay it out, put all the neurons in, and then with all of the neurons in the suit and it's sitting on the table, you connect it to a computer, and that's when you run Axis Neuron. And with Axis Neuron, I run the steady pose calibration. So steady pose is specifically used for when the suit is absolutely not moving. And I prefer to do this before I suit the talent up. Because what this is going to tell me, if the suit's not moving and I run steady pose calibration and the calibration returns that a sensor is moving, then clearly that sensor has been affected by magnetic fields because it's sending movement data when it's physically not moving. At that point, I know that that sensor shouldn't be used for this shoot, or I need to recalibrate it before they use it. And that's also the time when I set up the Wi-Fi connection to my portable wireless router. So depending on how many suits you have, how many talent are showing up, get there ahead of time, build everything on a table, connect them to the computer, set up their Wi-Fi, and make sure that everything is transmitting wirelessly. And once all your hardware is set up and good to go, then when the talent arrives, you can figure out when's the best time after they're done rehearsing to go ahead and start putting the gear on them. Let's see. Oh, another thing, big thing. Always put your neurons back in the case when you're finished. This case protects the neurons from magnetic fields while they're in transport. There's a lot of studios that purchased our suits. They buy them, they use it, they say, the first time we used it, it was great, we got wonderful capture data. The second time we pulled it out 3 months later and it was performing terribly. And it's because they left the neurons inside the suit while it was in storage, while they were transporting it from point A to point B. And your vehicle is a giant magnetic field. So always put the neurons, put them away when you're done using them. It takes time, I know, to pull it out, build them, and then when you're done, wrap it all up and put it away. But this is an expensive piece of high-tech equipment. So you have to do proper care and maintenance. So if you don't have these protective cases anymore, there's some people that have lost them. I don't know, do we have these as an option for sale on our site?
We do have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other option we have is the large Pelican cases. So she's my hardware inspector. Another tip for you guys. So I'm going to see if you guys can see this. Maybe I'll need to turn on the light. So if you're doing a shoot, there. I think this works. All right. So when you're working with these neurons, as you put them away, if their data has been good, if they've been performing well the entire day, you put them in with the 3 pins facing down. So just to give you a close-up of these guys. So there's 6 pins on each one of these. So if we take that and I put the pins facing down, when I look into the case, okay, I can see that these guys, they all performed really well during the shoot. But if I had any problems, okay, if talent picked up their cell phone and started taking selfies and the magnetic field from their phone caused the sensors in the fingers to go bad, if I have to pop those out and put them away and get fresh, clean, like good quality sensors in there, if anything's been giving me problems, I'll turn them sideways. So when I look in this case, I can see these guys are all working great, and I'm going to use them on the next shoot. But if I've rotated them by 90 degrees, turning them to the side, I know that these guys need to be recalibrated before I go and use them again on another shoot. So it's just a visual tip to make sure that you keep things organized. Let's see. So the other thing is, once you've built the suit and it's sitting on the table, if there's any connections that aren't working, if an arm or a leg isn't showing up in Axis, this gives you a chance to troubleshoot the suit and test your connections before the talent gets there, before sort of the heat is on. If something's not working, okay, if a sensor doesn't show up as connected even though it's in the socket, if a cable is connected but it's not showing up and the rest of the chain is off, like if the upper arm is off and everything down the arm is off, you can tell that's where the problem is. So the quickest thing to do is just disconnect the cable or pop out the neuron and push slightly on the pogo pins. Just give them a little tap. Sometimes, like an old Nintendo cartridge, I have to blow out the socket because during transpo you can get dirt or lint or things in there that cause problems with the sensor connection. So blow it out, reconnect everything, reconnect to Axis, see if that fixes the problem. If it doesn't, you can always take a neuron from one part of the body and the other part of the body, swap them, plug them in, fire it up, and see if that solves the problem. Let's see, running the steady pose, configuring the wireless. This is the time to do all that stuff before people start showing up. So let's move on.
Can I add one more thing, Ari?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just when you're doing a setup as well, everyone also look at the sensor LED. Every Perception Neuron sensor has an LED light on it. That's there. We have on the quick start guide a little bit of instructions how the LED on the sensors are to be read. There's modes that notify you that there's a connection, there's an active connection, or there's a resting connection that's going on. So we can talk about that later after Q&A.
That's a good point. This is true of, I believe, all from Pro to Studio and PM32. The less visible one is on the PM32 because the sensors are so small, but they are LED indicators. They flash red. So as Daniel said, when when you're on standby mode or when you're active capture, same way as you can see his hub blinking right now, that will identify the status of your sensor.
That's
cool. All right. Just to give you guys an example, so this is a hip holster, and I think it's for like a can of mace. This is the size of the battery. So again, the Anker Astro, and you'll see it fits right in there. I don't usually clip this closed, but what I'll do is sort of, because there's a power cable that needs to come out from the top. So you put the power cable to the side, and then I'll pop this around, and the cable will come out the top there and go to the battery. A better one is this little guy. So it's a pouch, it's got a clip on the side here, so it can fit over the belt line of the suit. And then the battery just really snugly fits right in there. These are much, much better than asking the talent to put it in their pocket or to try to, find a way to gaff tape it to them. But yeah, those are very handy. Also, when it comes to portable Wi-Fi routers, this little guy, so this is a travel router. It's like 2 inches by 1 inch. Plugs directly into it's powered by your computer's USB. And this one is made by the company Elecom. Not exactly sure where you can buy those, but it's really cool because it's so portable. All right, let's move on.
Ari, 1 second. We had a question in chat asking about our studio sensors. They're not as susceptible to magnetic waves because they have magnetic shielding. So as you can see, these sensors are bigger, but the housing that they're in helps protect them from the magnetic interference.
Correct. And our new studio system, which just went on sale, or just started shipping in December and January, it also has very robust software anti-magnetism features. So that's one of the big highlights, the big differences between the studio sensors and studio software and our introductory line of the PN1 and 2, which can't support that feature.
Perfect.
Okay, hang on a second. Screen sharing. Here we go. Cool. So we have covered that. Suiting up the talent. So after you've built the suit on the table, when the talent comes up and they're ready to go, I always start by putting on the main body harness and the head sensor. So from the suit sitting on the table, I'm going to disconnect the upper arm straps and the hip straps, or the hip cables, so that the main body harness is free to put on. After the main body harness is on, then I usually do legs and then do the arms, and putting the gloves on the talent last. During this time, you want to make sure that the talent has emptied all of their pockets from keys, wallets. They take off their watches and jewelry, their cell phones. Everything should go in a box or in a cubby that they basically shouldn't mess with until you're done with the capture day. When you're putting on the main body harness, the underleg straps are extremely important. Mm-hmm. So those underleg straps is what holds the hip sensor in place. So the hip sensor, the lower back sensor, needs to be placed just above the coccyx bone. And you want that to be securely anchored because the rest of the skeleton is derived from the location and movement of that sensor. The underleg straps make sure that sensor stays anchored where you want it, right on that hip bone.
Can I interject just real quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ari brings up a really good point with this, and it's something that if you're a really early Perception Neuron user, if you have a V1 kit, if you're a Kickstarter backer, if you're one of our early purchasers, we did not include that hip strap until much later on. Not much later on, but after we learned. So that's kind of one of the things that when we were getting the data of the quality, we kind of realized that it's an essential piece to make sure that those things aren't moving. And that's why with the upgrade kit, it'll help you get better capture if you're one of those early users, because, you learn your lesson over time, right? So, we try to improve the quality of the capture for our early users. So yeah, you can continue.
All right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk. This was covered in our previous webcast about proper sensor placement. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker over proper sensor placement than we did last time, but then I'm going to follow it up with photos of poor sensor placement so that I'm going to show you how to do it the right way. And then we're going to take a look at some of our users who have done it the wrong way and really highlight why it's important for it to be correct instead of incorrect. So the whole goal of this suit, okay, is to attempt to accurately track the movement of your skeletal bones. Okay, so every human body is different, height, weight, size, shape, and the less things that get in between the skeleton and our sensor, the better. So some things we can control, some things we can't. Primarily when it comes to clothing, you want to be wearing sports clothing, something that is not loose, not baggy, no sweatshirts, sweatpants, generally not a good idea. Dancers and martial artists, wear gym clothing, something that's just tight and form-fitting. Mm-hmm. And then because
athletic wear, I think, is the best way to put it, like athletic wear. So yeah, like not yoga pants, I guess, but you
correct.
Can like
athletic wear.
Like wear, yeah.
We got to add that to the terminology sheet. And the sensors, we want them to be on firm structures of the body, and we're going to show you that. The other thing is once the sensors have been placed, and once you've run the A, T, and S pose calibrations, you don't want those sensors to move. So you can educate your talent to not fidget with sensor placement. A lot of times people go up and they'll scratch the headband on their forehead. If you're doing finger capture, they'll start picking at the finger sensors. And when they start moving the sensors, keep in mind, they're moving your interpretation of the skeleton. So the less they touch, the better your data quality is. So for here, again, use the hip harness. The goal is to get that hip sensor locked in place and have it stay there and feed you proper data throughout the entire shoot. If that gets caught in somebody's belt and starts to arc, I was doing a dance capture. The suits were performing perfectly fine. The calibrations went perfectly fine, but in the choreography, the first movement that the performer did was basically go from a standing position to fold themselves in half and put their hands on the floor. And then as that person stood up, the hip sensor got caught in his belt so that instead of it being flat against his back, when he bent down, it got stuck in his belt. And then as he stood up, it bent 180 degrees the wrong direction, which basically folded his skeleton backwards. It was an anomaly which drove me crazy for about 5 minutes until I figured out what was happening. Sometimes, if people are doing extreme movements, what I'll do is I'll take gaff tape and actually gaff that hip sensor to either their belt or through their belt buckle to keep it in place. Their belt loop on the back of their pants, depending on what they're wearing. Anyways, it's an important sensor.
Some would say the most important sensor.
Slides.
Yeah. The most important sensor.
Okay, now let's talk about the upper back sensors. So the upper back, the central one should be right in between your shoulder blades. And then the two above that, they are not shoulder sensors, okay? That's a common mistake. People will put them on the front or up here by the neck, and they're more pivot point sensors. What you're trying to target is that area where the bone of your arm rotates. So if you see in this slide, this is where we're targeting, because it's right in line with that socket as you move your arm up into a T-pose. So generally, if the talent is moving from an A pose to a T pose, that sensor shouldn't move very much. It'll move slightly, but not a lot. if that sensor rests on top of your shoulder, you've got all the muscle that's up here in your traps, and that's going to be causing it to move vertically up and down quite a bit. And that'll cause your skeleton to hunch forward and backwards because it's expecting to be on the back. So with the leg sensors, your thigh sensors go 90 degrees out, away from the body. Your shin sensors are going to go 90 degrees forward, but then in a little bit so that they rest on the flat part of that bone, of your shin bone. So let's see. I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second and give you an example. Okay. How can I do this? I'm improvising here. All right. All right. Let's say this is your shin, okay? It's got an arc to it. And then if this is the sensor, if you put this directly on your shin bone, it's prone to wobble. If it's sitting 90 degrees facing forward right on the bone, it's going to wobble and jiggle a little bit. Whereas if you put it on the inside of your leg, just slightly on the flat part, it's going to be solidly attached to your shin and not move as much. Daniel, are we able to give an example of that? Or just the camera angle not conducive to it?
I can. Let me see if I can. You guys can see that?
Could we highlight Daniel's screen so you could bring that up? Yeah, perfect. So you can see.
See how it's slightly placed inwards on that shin bone. That gives it a solid connection to a flat surface of your bone. Whereas if it was directly straight on the shin, at the arc of the bone, it'll wobble. Okay.
Thank you.
How do I unspotlight? Bingo. Okay. And there we go, back to the screen. All right, so leg sensor, thighs 90 degrees out, shins facing forward, slightly inwards. And with the feet, you want them on the flat part of the outside of the foot. So again, this is the same issue. If you place the sensor on the very top of the foot where that arc is, you're gonna get some wobble. If you cock them out just a little bit so they're on the flat side of the foot, you're gonna get a nice, solid, stable connection.
And also keep in mind of your actors' shoes. Make sure they're wearing appropriate shoes, no loose laces. You want to make sure that sensor and the feet are solid, tracking the foot movement, not the shoe movement. You're tracking the foot movement.
Now, here's a tip that if by chance you're in a toxic magnetic environment, like let's say you're on a stage or you're at a convention center where in convention centers are notorious for having terrible floors because all of the electrical and piping conduit and everything is running under the floors. So it can generate huge magnetic fields. So if you're in a bad area for capture, you do have the option to just remove the foot sensor. Mm-hmm. You don't need them. You can either take the sensor out or disconnect the foot cables and pull it all together. Mm-hmm. And so you'll still get foot movement from it stepping on the ground, like lifting and landing, but you won't get rotation of the foot because the foot connection will be driven inverse kinematics so that when the thigh and the shin move and leave the ground, the foot will automatically follow it. However, like I said, if you're mocapping a ballerina where foot, toe pointing and everything is very important, you need to do it in a quality environment and use the foot sensor. Okay, for the upper arms, we've gone over the back, but for the upper arms, let's talk about the bicep, tricep, and the palm or the gloves. So if your talent is standing in an A pose, all three of those sensors should pretty much be in alignment. So let's go ahead and go back to Daniel real quick. So Daniel, go ahead, give me a profile and show them the positions of the bicep, forearm, and hand sensor. So the bicep, the forearm, and the palm are all in a line. Perfect. And the reason why I say forearm is, if you could bring your hand closer to the camera, that is not a wrist sensor. A lot of people put that directly on the wrist, and so that when the hand is moving, that sensor is rotating. Normally, see how much cable, excess cable Daniel has? I would normally try to move that sensor up the arm about another inch, so it's almost at the end of the glove.
It's all connected by Velcro. So that's why Ari says it's easy to move. You can take off that Velcro, move that sensor back like Daniel's doing right now. That way it gives you more room to put it physically on the forearm so it doesn't feel or get confused with the wrist movement.
Bingo. And at the same time when I'm doing that, if I move it, depending on the size of your talent, so these kits come with 3 sizes of gloves. You've got small, medium, and large. And all of these electronics are just Velcroed onto the glove. So you can disconnect all the electronics, find the glove that fits your talent the best, and then put all the electronics back on. However, if, say, you've got a person with small hands and the glove that happens to be ready to go is a medium, what I do is I'll ask the talent to basically hold their hand out like this and resist against me, and then I will push the glove as far as I can up the forearm. And then take that forearm sensor, and you can grab the glove, pinch it, and fold it so that the upper part of the glove is really tight on their forearm, and then put that sensor on top, and you're basically creating a stitch in the glove and then Velcroing it down, just to keep it firmly on that upper forearm. Because depending on the movement, if they're punching and kicking and doing a lot of things, it could slide down and start getting affected by the wrist. So pull that glove tight, put a little fold in the top of it, and then slap that sensor on top to hold it in place and to keep it firmly affixed to your talent. Okay, let's move on. All right, fingers. The best things about this suit is it's inexpensive and you get full finger capture. But a lot of people are putting the finger sensors in the incorrect position. So let's cover that. So in an A pose, you want the finger sensors. So first of all, on the hand, you'll see that there are 2 sensors on your index finger. You only put a sensor in the socket that's at the tip of the finger. Don't use that second socket on the index finger. It should have a blank plastic cap in it, or it should be empty. That's used for troubleshooting and diagnostics. So in the 4 fingertip sensors, they should all be on that second to last bone. I have no idea what that's called.
I think it's called the second flange or phalange. Yeah.
Put it on the second flange, not the first flange. Because most of the time people are still going to want to do things with their fingers, whether they're picking up a prop or whatever. So don't try to put the sensor right on their fingertip, because it's going to get knocked around and move places, and they're going to pick up quite a bit. So securely Velcro that down to the second flange. The thumb, however, does have 2 sensors, because what you want to do is when somebody gives you a thumbs up and then bends their thumb at a 90 degree, you want those sensors to be directly in line with each other so they create a 90 degree arc. Some of the troubleshooting tickets I've seen, those 2 are offset. And so when somebody bends their thumb, it's like not bending in a 90 degree arc, it's bending in a wonky way. So really make sure that that's at a 90 degree arc. And another thing is, if the tips are too loose, just like the upper arm, you can take the sensor off, and then on the top of that finger, take the glove, give it a small bend, like bend it over, and then put the sensor on it and lock it down in place. You're basically tightening the fit on the glove by using the Velcro strap. Okay, a bad example of a hand position during a T-pose. Okay, so first of all, when your talent is doing an A pose and an S pose, the hand should be flat, straight together with your thumb in. So A pose and S pose, bring that thumb in, Daniel. Bingo. So for A pose and S pose, paddle hands. I call them paddle hands. When you're going to do a T pose, bring that thumb out and down. So that's proper hands for a T pose. Go ahead and relax, Daniel. Thank you. In the slide, you'll see that the arm is winged up. So unfortunately, this person has their hand at about ear height instead of shoulder height, and that causes this arc in the wing. This will give you bad calibration data. Okay, quickly go through the posture calibrations. You have A pose, T pose, and S pose. The most important things during this process, number one, don't shuffle your feet. Your feet need to be directly below your hips, planted to the ground. Number two, make sure that your head is pointing forward the entire time. If at any point during these calibration poses somebody shuffles their feet or are turning their head to the right or left, you're going to get bad skeletal data. So, A pose. Just like the picture, just like Daniel's doing, stand straight, arms pointing down, your palms facing towards your body, and your feet should be directly parallel to each other. T-pose, all you do is you bring your arms up and your thumbs drop down and out at 45 degrees. She's not doing the thumb T-pose because she doesn't have gloves on. She just has hand sensors on in this image. And then S-pose, you're going to go ahead and just slightly bend your knees. So Daniel rotated to show you the proper S pose. Normally, they just face the same direction. Again, keep your feet planted and don't rotate, but there it is.
Sorry, but I just wanted to emphasize the profile of this.
No, that's perfect because the profile that Daniel's doing is correct. Okay, so now actually let's take a look at a couple of bad sensor placement photos that I've got. So here we go. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Is that showing up?
Yes.
Can anybody tell me what's incorrect about this? Okay, I'll tell you. First of all, I understand that at this time of year it was very cold and they were doing a capture outside, but this outfit is way too baggy to be giving us quality sensor data. So not only poor choice of clothing, but if we zoom up here on the shoulders, okay, you'll see she has them set as shoulders instead of the upper back pivot points. If we come down to the legs, you'll see the thighs here, they're straight on instead of being 90 degrees off to the side. And then down here at the feet, these are not the right shoes to be wearing. And B, the sensors are right there on top of the foot. So these are some common mistakes, and you definitely want to avoid them. Also, if you look at the hands, definitely wearing the wrong size of gloves for her frame. So these are clearly like a medium or a large, and so a different glove should be used. When I was talking about the thumb sensors, you see how when she bends her thumb, there's no way that's going to create a quality 90-degree angle. So these are all examples of things to avoid. Let's see. Okay, on the back. So the way that she has her hair at this time causes the sensor to tilt backwards. So when you're doing a calibration, her head is physically facing forward, but as soon as she starts moving, the head is going to be tilting up. because that's at a rotation. In the previous picture, I pointed out that the upper back sensors had been turned into shoulder sensors. So the upper back is not preferred. But primarily, you see how the upper back sensor is turned? So that's not straight vertical. It's actually cocked, I don't know, about 10 degrees clockwise. And so when you have your hip sensor, which is, first, it's too high. So we're looking about 2 inches higher than we want it to be. But the back sensor is turned. So the entire spine right now will have an arc to it as it starts moving because these two sensors are twisted and not in the right place during calibration. So that's a big one. These two, the upper back and lower back, should be in perfect vertical alignment affixed to the body. Let's see. Okay, another one, the user here put the sensors on top of the shoulders instead of them being upper back. Again, sweatpants, very baggy, so that as they start moving and doing, if they do anything other than basic walking, the clothing is going to start moving the sensors, which is going to cause them to slip and move and fall. Also, the thigh sensors here are set too high. They should be dropped about another 3 inches, so it's closer to the mid bone. And the same problem here with the shin sensors. Right now, he's got them right under his kneecaps. That's a problem because they're too high. You want them lower on the bone. I say mid bone as general advice, but that's what you want to shoot for. And here, as he's standing in an A pose, this is an incorrect A pose. You see how relaxed he is with his hands sort of just arcing forward? When you're standing in an A pose, you want your bicep, your forearm, and your thigh sensor to all be in one line. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing for a second. And Daniel, would you be able to give us just a proper A pose, a profile of a proper A pose?
While he's at that, can he also show an S pose? We have a question in the chat, just wanting to show what an S pose looks like. So an A pose, a T pose. You could just go through all the poses, if that's okay with Daniel.
Yeah, let's do a profile of them and then do forward facing. So this is a profile of a proper A pose. So he's forcibly hyperextending his arms and causing them to be straight, like a stick figure, pointing straight at the ground. And then from here, let's do a T pose. Is that an emergency alert going on?
Yeah, we just got a whole, all residents are urged to remain in their homes except for essential activities. I guess this is brand new.
Okay. So in this T pose,
show notice.
The thigh placement for the suit he's wearing right now, it'll work, it's fine. But again, I prefer to have it maybe 2 inches lower than where his thigh sensor currently is. That way, if somebody has anything in their pockets, or if they do need to put a battery in their pocket, the pocket isn't going to be hitting that thigh sensor. Let's go ahead and give me an S pose. Boom. So proper S pose, you want to keep the lower back and upper back as close to in alignment as possible. Give me an improper S pose. So that's a bad S pose. You see his hands are winging up to his eye line instead of being at shoulder level. His back is now tilted forward. A lot of people turn the S pose into a yoga pose, which is incorrect. Go back to a proper S pose. This is great. I have a remote control Daniel.
And I think what's important about this to note as well, because I think it was in the chat, they're saying that they're having difficulty with their performer holding that S pose. The bend isn't necessarily as important as the position of the arms being parallel to the ground. So it doesn't have to be a super over-exaggerated knee bend. It just has to be a slight bend where it's going to keep your arms parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, a slight dip is all you need with nobody's trying to do a squat here. Do you guys want to do, okay, go ahead, Daniel. Let's give an A pose just straight on.
Yeah.
Yep. Another reason why I usually lower the thigh sensors just a little bit further down than where Daniel's got them is because right now they're right at his hand height. So when your talent is standing and relaxing, depending on how they are, if they like to fidget, they'll start picking at that sensor because it's right at their fingertips. Go ahead and give me a T-pose. That's all it is. Raise the arms, drop the thumbs, and make sure that the arms are directly in line with the shoulder blades. A lot of times people in a T-pose, they'll wing up. They'll put their arms closer to their ears. Give me a bad T-pose. So it's like raise your arms higher than your shoulder.
Yeah, like over-exaggerate. Like, no, like bring them up. Like if you're going to do something like yeah.
Bingo,
something like that.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So monitor your talent and correct their posture, because if you don't correct their pose, you're going to get worse data. And then an S pose. You see how the hands are right in line with the shoulders? That's a beautiful camera angle and a beautiful S pose. Go ahead and relax, Daniel. Let's go ahead and move on. All right. Actually, can we poll the audience right now and see if they have any questions about what we've covered already, or if they're ready to move on to the next phase, which is, so we've already covered all the physical setup. The next phase, we're going to go into the software. So just quick basics on the software, but do you want to poll the audience and see if they have questions that we want answered, or if we're ready to move on?
Yeah.
A few minutes.
Yeah, while Daniel sets that up, I'll ask you a question from Raphael in the chat. He says, best practices for head placement when the hair is too slippery without hurting the talent forehead. So for someone who has maybe long hair, maybe someone who's a female performer who maybe normally keeps their hair down, any recommendations for something like that?
So preferably if they have longer hair, a low ponytail is preferred. So if you can get the ponytail to be tied down below the neck and then just put the headband on top, you want that sensor to be right in the back of their head. I don't know, can you guys see the back of my head?
Mm-hmm,
a lot of times people put the sensor here, which is underneath the skull. You want it right on the back of the head. So you've got all this area if they have longer hair. You could also put it in a high ponytail or a bun up on top. But you want to keep that sensor pretty much directly behind their eyeballs, so it's going straight. I don't know if that's, I don't know where my finger is.
Yeah, that you're good.
And the headband should go across the front of their forehead. A lot of talent, they want to be hip and cool like all the kids and put the headband up here like this. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cause the sensor to be too low on the back of their head. And B, if they are doing heavy activity, your forehead's going to sweat and that upper band is just going to pop right off. So the headband should be right above their eyebrows on the front of their head to lock that sensor in place on the back of their head.
Perfect. Vincent, thank you. Vincent's heading out of the chat. So thank you for joining us, Vincent. The rest of the episode will be recorded for your viewing pleasure.
It'll be uploaded on YouTube.
Perfect. So any other questions? So I believe the next phase is going to be the software, just a basic side of capture and recording. Am I correct with that?
Yep. And so what we want to do is go ahead and Daniel, if you want to go ahead and share your screen with me, we'll load up Axis Neuron.
Yeah.
I think we can. Perfect.
Yeah. So guys, this isn't going to be a very technical, I think I already mentioned this in the beginning. This isn't going to be a technical overview on the software. It's going to be a very basic overview of capturing, setting up the calibration. We'll definitely have a more in-depth conversation on all the functionality of the software. So don't worry if all your answers aren't questioned or answered during this portion.
Okay, so looking at Daniel's skeleton here. So when you first connect the suit to Axis Neuron, first let me go ahead and I'm going to change the layout to full functioning. Oop. I make boop noises when I click on things. It's what I do. A couple of quick things. You've got your view bar up here. So this is where you can choose multiple different layouts if you want to get different angles on things. Again, we're just going to focus on the basics of Axis Neuron. So when you first connect the suit, you're going to see the sensor map over here on the right-hand side. This tells you what's connected, what's functioning, what's not. So here you can see everything's green and yellow, which is perfectly fine for signal strength. Sometimes your sensors could dip into the red, and if they do, it's not that big of a deal as long as it's only for a couple of seconds. If a sensor goes red for a very long time, or if multiple sensors go red for a long time, that's an issue that you need to start troubleshooting.
A key indicator with that is to show if the sensor is magnetized. If it is red or if it's red for a long time, that's normally an indicator the sensor is magnetized, so you'd want to perform the demag procedure on that.
So when we connect the suit to the computer, first thing that I want to do is set the default body size. So for my talent, for Daniel, I'm going to ask, Daniel, how tall are you?
165 centimeters.
Okay. He's cheating because he knows how many centimeters he is. Normally people say 5'5". So I have to ask Google, hey Google, what's 5'5" in centimeters?
5.416666667 feet is equal to 165.1 centimeters.
Very exact.
It's fun. So first thing that you do is set the body size. Second thing I want to do is change the name to either my performer's name or the character's name that they're playing. And just in case I have to disconnect and reconnect the suit, okay, if I need to disconnect the suit to fix a cable or to fix a neuron, a lot of times it doesn't save the body size setting that I chose. And so I have to think about, wait, what was that character? With one person, no problem. If you've got 4 people that you have suited up, you disconnect everybody and reconnect them, and you're trying to get their body sizes set properly very quickly. What I do is I come down here. So there's a body size manager tab, and I'll go to male 165. I can right click, hit rename, and then right here I just put in Daniel. That way, if I disconnect the suit and reconnect the suit, from this drop-down menu, it'll tell me the person's name. So if there's 2 people that are the same size, I'll just use their first initial or like their first name, last name initials and list them there so I can find them quickly. After you've had their body size calculated, check the sensors and see what's connected, what's not. And you'll notice that Daniel's left hand doesn't have all the sensors in it. However, let's go ahead and zoom in on Daniel here. So go ahead and wave your hand for me. What is this? How are you moving just 3 fingers, but the whole hand is opening and closing?
Anyone? So, nope, no takers. So what Daniel's showing is that the glove and the software does recognize limited sensor placement. So as the whole body is configurable, that you can do upper body, lower body. Single arm mode, you also have the ability to choose how many fingers you want on the hands. So if you want to do full finger capture, you could add all 5 sensors on the fingers. Or if you're going to do 3 sensors, you could still get your thumb, your index, middle finger, and control the rest of the fingers using inverse kinematics.
So example, Daniel, get close up to the camera again, close fists on both hands, and then close your fists, and then just raise your pinkies. Ha-ha! So if you need that pinky action, you got to use all the sensors.
Mm-hmm. It's a good example.
Okay. So once you have verified the sensor map, you've set the body size and set their name, now let's go ahead and just do a quick calibration. So the calibrate button is right here. And now that the talent is suited up, we will not use steady pose. It is very, very difficult to try to get the talent to hold the steady pose during that. So that's why I do the steady pose beforehand while it's on the table. So here we go. I uncheck steady pose and then we run it.
And you could actually see, as Daniel's doing the posture calibration, you could see the avatar changing in real time. So that's pretty nice.
So after I've done the posture calibration, I usually have the talents. I say, okay, go ahead and wiggle some fingers for me. And I check the fingers. Okay, give me thumbs up and bend your thumbs. Boom. All right, give me a couple of leg swings. And swing the other leg. And then I say, okay, go ahead and just take a quick lap for me. Walk around in a circle. You can relax your hands.
He's like, he's going to walk around the whole time. Terminator position.
So the reason why I do that right after a calibration is just to make sure the sensors are giving me the data that looks correct. So check the fingers and the arms, have the legs swing, and then just have them take a walk in a circle so that their regular ambulatory movement is reflected properly in the skeleton. And then when you're getting ready to record a take, let's see. Oh, hang on, relax for a second, Daniel. So if we look at the parameters page, so down here you've got the body size manager, you've got parameters. Depending, for every shoot, I normally start all of these at about 0.6. So 0.6, 0.65, this is my general starting setting, because for the legs, the joints, and the feet contacts, all of these settings depend on the choreography of the movement. We'll get into that on another time when we're talking about getting more in depth about axis. So just to start, set them all at about 6.5. And then when you're doing a take, go ahead and give me a T-pose. We hit the record button. And what it's telling me is that some parameters will be locked, which means I won't be able to adjust things, which we're aware of. And then it asks, where do you want to set the files? So if you know where you want them recorded, it's better to have this path copied and pasted, because right now your talent's holding a T-pose waiting for you to record. Boom. So now we're rolling. And go ahead and relax and do something. Okay.
Or perform your best Julius Caesar.
Pretend you're going to a grocer and the door is locked.
Oh, you were cutting out there.
You're Captain Picard on the Starship Enterprise.
Ah, there we go. So.
Action. All right. Cool. So we're basically recording a take. We're capturing all the skeletal data. And then we can hit, we're going to go ahead and cut. So get T-pose. And that's a cut. Go ahead and relax. So it's not necessary with our suit, but it's good practice to make sure that your talent begins and ends with a T-pose, because that's going to make post-animation a lot easier for your animator if you give them files that have the T-pose already there. That's the basics of Axis Neuron: connecting, body size management, naming. Can we field any additional questions at this time?
Yes. So I have a question for you, Ari. So during the steady pose calibration, the suit is on. Is it possible to also turn off the suit and then put it back on the talent and have the suit reconnected, or turn back on?
Absolutely. That's the whole purpose of, yes, that's the correct process to do things. When you run the steady pose, here, I'm going to go ahead and, okay. So the whole purpose of steady pose is to tell you if a sensor is feeding you movement data when it's not moving. So you build the suit, you connect the power, you connect it via USB tether to your computer and run the steady pose. If everything's good, disconnect it, unplug it. You can disconnect the different limbs on the suit, put it on your talent, reconnect everything, power it on, reconnect it to your computer, and you're good to go. The steady pose calibration is only done once during your initial setup. It's not something that you do on a regular basis. Just the first time, the beginning of the morning when you build your suit, that's when you run it.
Yes. Excellent. I don't want to get into too much detail with these things. Daniel, is it possible to share your screen? Or if you could pass over or you're sharing to Daniel. Daniel, just because I think it's important to note that, just make sure that when you get your suit, that you check that your sensors are on the latest firmware as well as the hub. We've run into issues where customers don't realize that they are using an outdated version and then the suit doesn't connect. So I just want to show that that is under the tools section. That should be the first thing that you do. So in the tools, go ahead.
When you build your suit and it's sitting on the table and it's connected, okay, you want to go to Tool and then click on Upgrade. I don't think it's going to work right now because we're wirelessly connected.
You can swap
please reconnect your hub. Okay, let's do that.
Okay, and disconnect my suit and let me switch over to hardware.
So Daniel's going to switch over and then we'll be able to see what that looks like.
That we cover this section. Okay, so go to Tools.
Okay,
go to Connect just to make sure it is working. Okay, all right, so now
so if we go to Tool, so now he is connected via USB tether to the computer. And we're going to go to Upgrade. And yes, I want the information on the device. Boom, so this is all green. So first, you want to look over here to see which sensors are showing up. So you want to make sure that everything's green and that all the sensors you plugged in are being detected. If the suit's not built properly or the cable's not corrected properly, you could have a limb or a segment or some sensors that don't show up here. So first, check that. Next, pop over here, and if any of your sensors or your hub have not been updated, then this light will be red. Mm-hmm. So step one, go to our website and download the newest version of our Axis Neuron software for the V1 and V2. Step two, install that software. Step three, build your suit, put in all the sensors, and then connect it via USB tether and check for upgrades. Now, your suit comes with, a few more sensors than there's actually sockets for. I think the suits come with 32, and there's
you only need 31
sensors
on the body. Yes, you only need 31.
Right. So after you've done the upgrade, pop out one sensor, put in that extra guy, run the upgrade again to make sure that he's upgraded as well.
Perfect.
We can also quick the calibration tool since we're in that.
Do you want to show them the calibration tool?
Yes, we can show them the calibration tool. Hold on.
Cool. I'll tell you what. I'm going to give up remote and let you run it. So if a sensor has become magnetized, if you've suited somebody up and the first thing they do is grab their phone and start shooting selfies for Instagram, the magnetism from their phone has just caused problems with all of those hand sensors. So if you have a demagnetized sensor and it needs to be recalibrated, this is how you do the magnetic calibration on a sensor. Mm-hmm. So, take it away, Daniel.
All right. Yeah, you guys can jump in as well. I'm just, for this exercise, I'm using the prop tool cable. This is found in your kit. And I'm connecting the prop tool cable to the USB to the hub. And then the hub is connected, hardwired tethered to the computer. When you go into Axis Neuron, You want to make sure first, of course, that your sensor is placed on the end of the prop tool. And this is how it looks like. It's just, all it is just a solo socket. Okay, and I have the sensor already. And
do you want to go off share screen for just a minute so people could see what that looks like?
Okay.
Oh, and you're probably going to want to remove the glove for the spin calibration.
Yes. For this exercise, I'm going to do it for the gloves just for the sake of the exercise. Right now, what I'm looking at is that the sensor is breathing mode, meaning that there's an active connection. It's just waiting for some kind of communication from axis neuron. So let me share my screen so you guys can see axis neuron. And right now, we're just showing you the steps. Okay, we can go on a different, little bit in depth on a different video, but just showing you real quick what it entitles to. Inside of axis neuron, you go to tools, go to upgrade. And then click yes. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I went to the wrong window. Click finish. Tools, calibrate sensor. These are the instructions that it shows you to do the connection, what I just went through. I'm going to connect to the hub. I'm going to communicate to the perception sensor. You want to place the sensor on a flat surface. Obviously, make sure that you're not placing it on the table that has magnetic interference. Make sure it's a clean area. The same location you would put your suit on for the steady pose. Hit next. At this point, it's going to communicate to the sensor. And it's going to give you the data from a live data feed from the gyro. Right now, I'm just moving it very softly. And then in another video, we'll go in depth how to tell if it's drifting or not. So right now, I'm going to go ahead next. Just make sure you're not performing this near magnetic interference. It's going to tell you not to disconnect the cables. Make sure everything is powered on. Do not disconnect. You have different options to do the calibration, either with a little twirl of the cable. There's a slow motion process that you can see in the video, or you can hold the sensor in the tip of your finger and also rotate. I tend to I prefer this one, much easier. It's easier on the wrist. So I'm going to click on next, and it's going to do a quick countdown. I'll wait for the countdown to finish, which I'm just holding the sensor in my other hand, and I'm going to just twirl around.
Nunchucks.
Yeah, and you see as Daniel's twirling the sensor around and rotating it, that sphere is actually filling up with data points. The goal of this is to fill those data points as much as possible. So you want to make sure you're rotating the sensor on all axes, both the Y, the X, and Z.
Okay, so now once that's done, I'm waiting for a little dialog at the bottom. It tells me ready, and I can click next. I can continue to the next sensor, or I can just exit out of this window.
Before you exit, I was going to say, you could show that the sensor doesn't move just by the rotation of the thing, but That's okay. Yeah.
We can cover that. We can cover that in a different video, but I just wanted to show you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So definitely don't worry. We're going to go more in depth with, again, with the whole axis neuron software, from the calibration to the upgrade to how everything works. So don't worry if things feel like they're being covered a little bit too fast, because we will dedicate a whole episode to that.
We've got a quick question here from Raphael Bernard, and he's saying that when he's trying to recalibrate the sensor, due to the prop cable being really stiff, it prevents the sensor from laying flat on the table. You can physically just hold that sensor on the table. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's an arc in the cable that's causing it to flop on its side, just physically take your fingers, hold it in place, and then you can slowly rotate it right and left, and it should be matching the same speed that you're rotating.
Yeah.
You don't, after a calibration, if you want to test the quality of the sensor data, you don't want to rotate it really, 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 really fast and then slap it on the table like a domino. I see a lot of people that have done that thinking that the sensor should take that much force. And it's not designed to do that. Just rotate it slowly in a figure eight with your hand, and then set it on the table, and then use your hands to rotate it back and forth.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Remember, these sensors are smaller and more sensitive, so there is a threshold of dynamic movement that they are able to hold. So again, when you're placing it down, the goal isn't to try to break the sensor. You're trying to recalibrate it. So just put it down, make sure that it's not moving around, and that it's not magnetized.
Whatever table that you're working on, thoroughly use the magnetometer app and make sure that the table you're working on doesn't generate magnetic fields. A lot of times, some tables will have a metal I-beam underneath them holding it up, or near the legs and support structures, they'll have screws that connect to the legs, and those can tend to generate a magnetic field. So if you are trying to calibrate your sensors and you're using a table that's going to decalibrate them, you're going to get stuck in a loop of frustration.
Yeah. All right. I think that's our Q&A section. I think we're by that section.
All right. So here we go.
All right.
Moving on. Alex, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it'd be really cool to kind of show you guys some projects that have used Perception Neuron 32 in the past, and we obviously still have a bunch of clients and customers that use the original suit. But some projects I wanted to highlight were Pixel One Studio in Tunisia, and actually, give me 1 second because I actually want to pull these up. I should have had these ready on YouTube, so I apologize for not having the links for these ready to go right now. So just give me 1 second. Pixel One Studio. And so I'm going to give you guys a link to the studio and a behind the scenes of what they did with the project. And then it's there on their channel. You can have all the information of how they did this. They actually also did facial capture, which is really interesting. And they're basically turning around this episodic content in roughly 24 hours. So it's really, really fascinating. They're based in Tunisia, and then there's also Studio Local, who was one of our really early onset winners for the Set Your World in Motion contest. They're based in New Zealand, and they created a short film, won a lot of different awards, and they basically, you could see the shot, the frame, where they're using Perception Neuron 32 to create the robot named Gary here on the right-hand side. So, continue to show us your projects, share content that you're making, because we'll continue to highlight some of these awesome things that are happening in the community. I think that's really nice to see, and you could see some of the use cases that are showing up, with the suits and what people are doing. So let me show this one as well.
All right.
So yeah, I think that's it from that one. I'm going to be sharing the links onto the chat so people can have see what that looks like.
Address as well, guys, is that our Perception on version 1 from our Kickstarter is a great tool, is an awesome hardware to have from Mocap. Today we discussed a lot of tips and tricks, how-tos. If you guys follow those rules, you guys are going to achieve the best Mocap out there. We've seen so many good projects that have been done with version 1 and version 2. And don't get discouraged just because it says version 1. It's a great tool. Follow these rules from today's video, and you're going to achieve a really good Mocap.
This seems like there's a fight happening in the back. So version 1 was our original Kickstarter kit that was available for the people that were that had backed us on Kickstarter, and that was on sale for probably an additional 6 months to a year. From that point on, we ended up switching over on the hardware component side to strap and socket system, which is now available, and that's what we have. So it's still the Perception Neuron 32. It's just a V2. If you're an original V1 user, we still have replacement parts available on our store. We still support it, but what you're going to be able to find now on our webpage is the V2.
Awesome, guys. Well, is there any last questions before we get out of here on this beautiful Friday afternoon?
In quarantine?
In quarantine. now that we have the notes. Hold on. In terms of just one more question from Raphael in the chat. He says, in terms of the force neurons can handle, any best practices for fast, heavy action motion, long takes without the capture, and motion not being corrupted and or buggy. So do you want to answer that?
Give us an example of the motion. So when you're talking about fast, heavy action motion, the suits do really good with martial arts if you're doing kicks and punches, things like that, but not with impacts, okay? Mm-hmm. You do not want to be slamming this technology into a person or into the ground. All of that needs to be done with your animation package and software. So you have to think about any type of combat using these suits. You have to think theater stage combat, the same safety standards you would use for theater stage combat. So if you're doing any type of fist fighting, then you do it at 3/4 speed or half speed, and choreograph it so that nobody's actually ever getting hit. It's all about movements, reactions, making sure that if you're going to throw a punch, you have to think about how your virtual camera is going to be lined up so that you break the plane and you sell the impact with a well-timed body reaction. I had somebody like do a full backflip wearing these suits, and everything looked great until the impact with the ground when they landed from the backflip, because the amount of force that's created when somebody does a move like that, these particular sensors on the V1 and V2 don't handle the impact that well.
Yeah, I'd say the acceleration threshold. Yeah, it's your acceleration threshold and coming to an abrupt stop. Mm-hmm. If you need to do any crazy movement and crazy action, that's what our studio kit is designed for. Yeah. So the robustness of our sensors and our software for studio, as you can see in the sandbox session videos that I've been filming. If you go to our YouTube channel, go to Noidum's YouTube, and you'll see sandbox sessions with Perception Neuron Studio. There's a lot of extreme action, some stunts, some flips, things like that. Those are all done with Studio. The V1 and V2, not so good at that. Yeah, I also think an important point to note is that obviously Daniel's live and he's been moving around for some time, and there's lots of projects that show a Perception Neuron in action for longer than 30 minutes or something like that. But in the normal animation and film background, correct me if I'm wrong, Ari, most takes are normally probably somewhere in the range of 30 seconds to 3 minutes. So they're not necessarily long takes. You're kind of recording things on a short-term basis. So you're not going to have someone performing high impact movements for 30 minutes straight.
Right. Mm-hmm. Somebody had a question. My good friend Rebecca from high school has been watching this, and she asked, "What do you do with people that have artificial limbs? How do you handle magnetic interference with somebody that's got an artificial bone or a pin, things like that?" And the answer is almost all medical grade joint, hip, bone replacements use non-magnetic metal. So that's
not an issue as far as we've seen.
Now, when I was trying to use this suit on a T1000 about 3 weeks back, that was a pain. I mean, those things, the hydraulics and the electronics, it's a mess.
Too much.
Definitely use a studio suit.
Perfect. So I think so. Let's answer one more question from Raphael, and we'll close out. You could finish that thought, Ari, and then
Raphael, I got answers to both of these. Mm-hmm. So specifically with the studio, the V1 and V2 suit, when it comes to drummers, okay, I did motion capture for a VR music video. And what I learned is that the drummer, the speed at which the wrists whip the hands is much too fast for the accelerometers of the V1 and V2 to handle. So the drummer knew the choreography for his song, but we had to turn his hands into more like tom-tom drummer boys. So we had him lock his hand and his wrist. Instead of whipping like this, we just had him do, he did the motions, but not the full performance, full speed whips. And what we captured, the data quality was the most important thing. And so we captured it really well when he locked his wrists. If he continued whipping his wrists, the hand would actually rotate around and start to helicopter. The entire thing was pivoting from the wrist. So there's Daniel wrapping up. But yeah, so when it comes to drummers or any electronics or any performance, what you have to do is your goal is to get quality capture. So if the data doesn't look right, then you have to figure out creative ways to adjust the choreography and adjust the movement of those joints so that the data looks good, but you're still selling the story. The other question you had as far as props go, wood and plastic and rubber are always best. So wood, plastic, rubber, absolutely zero problems. One of the first times I got my hands on these suits, I wanted to have soldiers running around the backyard with an alien invasion. I was doing a VR project called Remember, which is all about aliens popping into Earth and messing with people. So I was doing a capture in my friend Veronica's backyard, and we had Jarrell and Alex were there and Jarrell brought his guns. Like he has a bunch of airsoft weapons that he uses for making his stunt videos. And the airsoft guns have electronics because they're battery powered and they've got pneumatics in them. So as soon as the talent picked up those and started running around with them, the hands started to go really, really poor because the weapons they were holding are actual airsoft rifles that have electronics in them. No good. So you have to find props that don't have magnetic fields and don't have electronics in them to get quality hand and arm capture.
Cool. Thank you so much for that, Ari. I think we're going to go a little bit more in depth. I can see Bao asking in the chat about the extra sockets, the replacement ones, in case you have a faulty piece. We can show that connection. I think we have some Daniel when we go more into the software side, so you can see how that connection would take place. So don't worry, we are going to answer that, and we'll go more into it. Well,
the short answer is yes, because when you have one socket, the V2 and V1 suits come with either one or two spare sockets, depending on which version you got. And those sockets are gray, and they basically take the place of whichever socket is missing from that chain. So if your upper arm socket has died for some reason, somebody stepped on it, it got crushed, the cable broke and it's not usable, you can take that replacement, throw it in that spot, and the system will know that, oh, hey, this isn't here, but there's a spare socket. Should I use that one for this joint? And you just click yes, or it'll auto-detect it. Cool.
Yeah, we can show that. So I see James says he's going to forward that email. And we'll definitely, like I said, we're going to go way more in depth with this. It was a really quick capture and recording, so you guys see how that operates. I think the last slide that Ari has just says thank you. So I think if you guys don't mind me closing it out, I'll just say thank you to everyone that joined us today. Really appreciate the support on the first two episodes of the webinar. We're going to continue doing these on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Each episode is going to be recorded and posted onto YouTube later on. We're just basically cleaning up the dead spots. So the episode from Tuesday should be going up later today if it's not up already. Continue to send us topics, things that you guys want to see, things that you want to hear from. So pretty much I think it's going to be us doing the episodes regularly. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. Everyone stay safe and healthy. And we'll continue to, produce content and shows for you guys.
Are we going to send them a follow-up survey just to see what they liked and what they didn't, and give us some feedback?
After this webinar is done, you guys will be receiving a survey of several questions that helps us improve our shows. So make sure you guys follow up on that survey.
It helps us.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely want to target
yeah.
all of these. We want to target our content for your interests, and definitely give more attention to areas that you guys have more questions about, and spend less time on areas that
maybe are less interesting. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So thank you guys again. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. I think Tuesday we're doing pro.
We'll make the announcement shortly on the topic for Tuesday.
Yeah.
We're going to blast everything on Facebook.
Send us ideas. But yeah, well, I think, yeah.
Want to hear you guys, okay?
Perfect. Thank you guys.
Everybody stay safe out there.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.